Hello and welcome to Pulse, your podcast delving into all things health, innovation, digital and data. Proudly brought to you by Pulse+IT News. I'm your host, Louise Shaper.
And I'm your other host, George Margelis.
George, this episode is going to air after Christmas, but we're recording it just before Christmas. But I'm keen to ask, how was your holiday?
We spent 12 days in Japan with my youngest son. It was quite an eye-opener. I actually used ChatGPT to help build my itinerary. And the prompt I use is, two nerdy men who are into games and anime in Tokyo. What should we do? And it came up with an amazing itinerary. So I must admit, if you want nerdy things to do, Japan is the place to do them.
All right. Well, what were some of the highlights?
So we went to a theme park called Joyopolis, which was like full of anime characters. We went to Tokyo Comic Con, which was really interesting. I thought some of the people here were over the top, but Japanese take it to a whole new level. There was every possible costume you could consider, all walking through. We had photos taken with everyone from Mr. Bean to Darth Vader in a Santa Claus outfit.
Mr. Bean. Okay. Well, hang on. Well, what did you dress as?
We went as Australian tourists.
Oh, come on. Were there many people not dressed up? Because I would have thought you'd be the minority.
So, I mean, there was a significant component of cosplay people who were there, but most people were sort of running around in relatively normal clothes. And yeah, they had games and they had comic book characters and they had statues of people. It was an impressive thing. They had a Batmobile and they had a car from Back to the Future there. So we had lots of photo opportunities. They're very friendly people, so we had photos taken with a whole bunch of them. We went up to Sapporo, we saw some snow, and we went to Kyoto, and we went to, if you ever get a chance to go to Kyoto, there's this amazing park called Nara Park, and literally it has hundreds of deer roaming wild in this park, which you just literally come up to you and feed you. And these deer are very smart. They've obviously realized that the Japanese custom of bowing gets you more food, so...
Really?
Deer were coming up and bowing to us, and yeah, we'd feed them and they'd bow afterwards.
And what do you feed the deer?
Actually, you can buy these special rice cracker type things.
Of course, it's rice. It's Japan.
Exactly, yeah. So the cuisine in Japan is exquisite. There's so much variety in Japanese type food, but so many different varieties of it. We never got bored with what we could eat.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, I'm disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing a photo of you dressed as Mario or something like that.
Yeah, didn't quite get there.
Oh, cool. That's so good. Yes. And how's the granddaughter going?
She's really good. She was just visiting us now, actually. She was fantastic as always. We're having lots of fun, playing with us. Like I said, I've got 3 sons, so learning what to do with little girls. But at this stage, it's just cuddles and kisses.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great.
How was Sydney while I was away in Australia? I mean, you and Mike did a fantastic job.
He was really great. He did very well. And yeah, we got lots of positive feedback, although we did miss you, George. And I forgot that Mike, his music production work, that's really taking off as well. So yeah, he was showing me some videos offline of a guy that he's producing, and he actually has done the video as well. And it's like 12 cameras. And so I just thought he did the audio. I mean, it's a big enough deal. I thought he was mostly the audio guy, but yeah, no, he was doing videography as well and editing it all together. So he's a busy guy.
He is a jack of all trades and really bright. I mean, he loves his gadgets as well. I first met Mike at a HIMSS event of Talking Gadgets back 20 years ago.
Well, we have got a jam-packed episode. Shall we get over to our hot topics?
We really should, yep.
Well, considering this is our final episode for 2024, we're going to change it up today, people. So today in the PulsePod studio, George and I are going to discuss some of the hot topics of the year as it pertains to the Australian and New Zealand health systems.
That's right, Louise. Now, I should stress that we aren't going to cover every single hot topic and happening because there's been a really busy year and we've got some really exciting things happening. But we're attempting to cover the key topics, and thanks to our friends and colleague, Kate McDonald, who really gave us the background of those hot topics to discuss. I think we should have a informative and exciting session for people to listen to while sitting at the beach over the Christmas break.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with talking about Kate, because readers of Pulse+IT would have seen the announcement earlier this month that our beloved and super talented journalist Kate McDonald has penned her last piece for Pulse+IT. This marks the end of an era for digital health journalism in Australia and New Zealand, as many Pulse Potties would know, because you've been reading Kate's excellent reporting for 12 years. Some of you would know that my previous organisation, HISA, now the Australasian Institute of Digital Health, we used to have an annual media award. And I know, George, you were there at many of those award nights. And we had to cancel that media award because it ended up with Kate just winning it every year. She was just too good. And Kate was the inaugural Pulse+IT Island Editor-in-Chief and the Global Editor-in-Chief for Pulse+IT. So it was wonderful, of course, having Kate here with us in the PulsePod studio, and we miss her. But of course, we wish her every success in her new adventures.
Yes, I mean, Kate's been a stalwart for many, many years. I used to look forward to my Pulse+IT blast in my email every morning and hear her stories. And I used to love the way that she not only reported the stories, but actually gave opinions and went to the trouble of scratching under the surface to find out what was happening. And she didn't spare the rod when it came to criticizing things. She was great to work with. I wish her all the best in the future. I'm sure the next industry she puts her head to will have a significant change in the quality of its journalistic integrity as well. So, yeah, I wish her all the best.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, not just in tribute to Kate, but yeah, those Pulse+IT reviews articles that she does at the end of every year were fantastic. So that's what we're going to do today. So in Kate's final pieces for Pulse+IT, she reflected on the big stories of 2024. Pulse+IT's Year in Review issue is something of a tradition, and it's really good reading. So in today's final pod of 2024, we're going to reflect on the current state of digital health in Australia and New Zealand, and we're going to be referencing Kate's Pulse+IT Year in Review articles. Now, if you're thinking of entering the world of digital health, or maybe you're inducting your staff soon, or you're in the field but you're heading into like a big strategy meeting and you want to sound like you really know what's going on, then this is the podcast episode to get you started. But then you need to go and read the Pulse+IT Year in Review issue, and we're going to put all the links to it in the show notes. Shall we get cracking, George?
We shall. It's been a full-on year, hasn't it? I mean, the fact that there was 4 different articles covering this year, and then also the New Zealand articles and the Irish articles. It's been a big year in healthcare, digital health around the world, but in Australia in particular, we've had a great year. And it's been characterised by one thing in particular, I think, what's really brought to our attention, the push for interoperability.
Yes.
The growth of that digital front door option, people who are thinking about how they utilise systems better. Lots of money being spent in digital health infrastructure, utilising new solutions. So the shift from some of the older architectures we've had to new architectures. And we've seen a lot, and I think that's a lot is a understatement, a lot of discussion about AI and how it's integrating into healthcare and delivery. So I think a lot of key areas to focus around. EMR implementations, we've only been talking about those for the last 20 years. I think we'll be talking about them for the next 20, but it is a core part of what is required to deliver digital health. We've seen virtual care come and go and come again. So we've seen some significant advances this year with departments of health taking on virtual care as a major part of it. And if you look at their strategies, it's there. We actually have a national digital health strategy. We even have a national aged care digital strategy, and we have broader national digital strategies from government. So strategies are a big thing. So, again, as you pointed out, if you're looking at your strategy, there's important documents to read, but if you listen to us, you'll get the gist of what they really mean. And cybersecurity. Unfortunately, cybersecurity has also been very highlighted in many, many things over the year. But the other good thing, of course, yay, Australia, FHIR, the Australian generated standard, is becoming a global standard. And we've seen lots of discussion there. We've even seen Australia adopting its own universal standard. So that's a been really exciting time. So look, lots happening. Kate's reporting over the years has been fantastic. We've captured a lot of that information. I really do recommend, as you said, go back into those review articles. And if you want the deep dive, going back into the original source documents, there's some really great stuff happening.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure FHIR is probably the most common used acronym on the pod this year, George.
Absolutely. Look, and we are particularly proud of our good friend Graham Grieve, who really came up with that concept of FHIR. It's taking off around the world. I mean, when you see Google and Apple talk about it all the time in their discussions, which is great. A note to our Sparked people, we still don't have a Sparked t-shirt. So, yeah.
Yeah, we have to hit them up.
We are here for them, but I think it's been really good. We are definitely big fans here. And look, it's been coming in multiple ways. I mean, the other thing, of course, we've seen is the digital front door. So thinking back to those dark dim ages back in 2020, 2021, when we were all locked away in our homes, and we sort of had the advent of the vaccination programs. And there was a company called Five Faces that helped Sydney LHD in particular, but which was my local area,
Oh, cool.
to drive that whole vaccination booking service. And we look back on how easy it was back then to get 5.5 million people in New South Wales vaccinated through these huge centres over at Homebush and around the country. Those digital front doors are really big things as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I believe that Five Faces have taken all those learnings and applied them over here in Melbourne.
As always, the Victorians follow on what the great work we do up here in New South Wales. And yes, I know Alfred's using it. But again, just all those healthcare services now start to think digital front doors, which is interesting because, that was one of the big changes we saw here in New South Wales when Victor Dominello sort of took over services New South Wales model. And we actually had a Service New South Wales app, which enabled us to do so many things. So that digital front door to government services has now extended all the way through to the healthcare services around the country. And we're used to having that one door access. The other thing, of course, we've seen that we talked about EMRs. We've seen good friends up in the Northern Territory implementing the InterSystems-based Acacia EMR. And the system's gone live in 4 hospitals. That's been an interesting experience. Katherine, Gove, Royal Darwin, and Palmerston Regional Hospitals. If you want to see 4 more disparate hospitals there, we go from a capital city hospital to a very rural site. And our good friend John Lambert up there is obviously doing a great job in making all those sort of things happen.
Yeah, that's right. And they did have some hiccups with that installation at Royal Darwin's ED, but, these things, they're difficult and it's complex. But what I think is so great about the digital health community, well, so many things, but when there are hiccups and that, there's learnings that can be shared, so that together we can share those learnings and advance.
Absolutely. Look, the reality is these are complex implementations of complex systems into a complex working environment with high risk. You can't afford to fake it till you make it in healthcare. And I think it'll be a very cold day in Sydney Harbour in December before I can see a digital health rollout that goes painlessly. And we'll touch on it a bit later, but New South Wales has put its hand up for a very, very big organisational change coming forward, and I wish them all the best. But these are complex projects. IT projects have significant complexities and failure rates associated with them. The fact that the persistence of the people up in the Northern Territory to drive their system through, they are basically designing their system on the fly to suit a very, very unique healthcare situation. Those of us who have been up to the Northern Territory realise that it's not a smaller version of Sydney or Melbourne. It's a very unique situation.
Very different needs, yeah. And there's been some other EMR happenings around the place. So here in Victoria, and Sydney as well, the St Vincent's Health, they chose Meditech's Expanse platform as the foundational EMR for 10 of their hospitals.
Yeah, that's been interesting because I've been engaged with them for many, many years, and they were one of the ones who originally, in New South Wales at least, designed their own EMR system for use within their organisation, and it naturally evolved within their organisation, but they hit that rough patch where it was never designed to scale out to the sort of size and need that was required. So they've gone back to the market, and they've had various attempts at going back to the market. Meditech is a great solution. It's been widely used around the world. But again, this is one of the big challenges we face in this space. And having worked in both public and private hospitals, they are very, very different organisations. They have very, very different needs. And designing systems that works for an Australian private hospital is very different from what an American private hospital or a Singaporean private hospital is. So there's going to be a lot of need for skilled people in Australia to refine and fine-tune those solutions.
Yeah, there will be. Actually, I'm doing a bit of work, which is actually, I need to look at private hospitals and what sort of EMR type systems they're using. And the few interviews I've done so far, people have literally sworn, in a nice way, and said, if you can fix this, do anything you can to help fix this paper-based system, you'll be a hero. Anyway, so yeah, they're desperate for it. So it's great to see things are happening. But in New South Wales, George, you touched on it a few seconds ago, there's a pretty big project happening there.
When we do things in New South Wales, we do them boots and all. So we've now announced a single digital patient record system. So New South Wales actually has a pretty sophisticated EMR system in its public hospitals. Nearly all of our local health districts are running an implementation of what was then Cerner, now Oracle solution. Hunter New England didn't go down that path and had a best of breed system that was using Orion to integrate it all together. And there was a decision a year or two ago by the Department of Health to go to a single digital patient record system throughout the whole state. Now, there are 16 local health districts in New South Wales. They vary from inner western suburbs of Sydney with Sydney Local Health District, where you have 3 tertiary referral hospitals within 5 kilometres of each other, all the way out to Brewarrina in far western New South Wales, where the distance between healthcare facilities is measured in hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres. So it's a really disparate system. We have 600-bed acute care tertiary hospitals, and we have 4-bed community hospitals in regional rural areas. And we're not quite sure how much they're spending. Lots of figures are being thrown around.
Lots of zeros on the end of that bill.
All those figures have a B. None of them have anything smaller than a B at the end. So there's a lot of money about to be spent. They've changed the infrastructure. We actually now have a special unit just to do the single digital patient record and another unit to keep the existing system in place, because this is a 5-year plus project. So we can't turn off everything else and wait for this one to be ready. It's going to be a very interesting time. We'll be watching with great interest. The winner was Epic. Epic, this could well be their largest single instance implementation in the world. Interestingly, Cerner, when New South Wales Health took on Cerner, we were their largest outside the United States implementation. So, like I said, we do things big. Watch. Hopefully, it'll be lots of good news stories. I suspect we'll have a few glitches along the way. But yeah, again, there's a pretty impressive team behind the projects here, including our good friend Rich Taggart, who's come back to New South Wales Health to keep it going, running forward.
Yeah, yes. We will be speaking to Richard in the new year. And then over to head west, yes, Western Australia, they're finally taking steps towards getting a modern EMR system. Amazing.
They've been holding out, haven't they? I mean, I remember, I think it was 2005, 2006, one of my very first projects when I first started back at Intel then was to go and meet with the CIO of WA Health. So they were just about to go to tender for an EMR. And 19 and a half years later, they're just about to go to tender for an EMR.
Yes, it's been a long time coming. I think that's a fair enough statement. But then they have been considering this for years. And, in recent years, what I was told was that, it's gone back up to Treasury. So Treasury are thinking about it. But they have now put out a call for registrations of interest from vendors. It'll be interesting to see if those hold-ups that they've been encountering for 19 and a half years are now actually dealt with and they can actually make progress.
And for our overseas listeners, I mean, Western Australia is big. It's like literally half of Australia is in Western Australia, and there is some really, really empty spaces in between. Lots of mines in between as well. So they do have the availability of some mining funding that may help. But yeah, again, it's not an easy task to implement a solution that includes remote Aboriginal communities, people in the middle of nowhere, and a major capital city. So it should be interesting to watch.
Yes, it will. And on behalf of all my family and friends in WA, bring it on, is what I say.
Don't try to poach Louise away from Victoria and take her back to WA to solve the problem for you.
The funny thing is, this morning, I woke up to a WhatsApp message from my cousin who works in the health space with letting me know about this job that is being advertised in WA. She thought I might be interested, which is very sweet. Okay, now onto the business side of digital health, which has seen a huge amount of activity in 2024. There's been a heap of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of consolidation happening in the industry.
There has been. I mean, it's been a very interesting year, and I think we've seen consolidation across digital health businesses around the world, but Australia's had some pretty big moves. And in particular, our probably largest digital health organisation, Telstra Health, has had some pretty big moves this year. They've sold off part of their services like secure messaging and e-referrals to market leader HealthLink. And that includes their famous and venerable Argus service, which many, many care providers use.
Yeah, and they only bought Argus a few years ago, I think, so they've really integrated it, but big move now. And I guess they're sort of shifting their focus or priorities because they've also acquired their remaining share in Fred.IT, the pharmacy software developer. So now they own that outright.
Again, I mean, Telstra Health's been an interesting organisation to watch. I mean, it was a telco. It started off as a telco back in the days when NBN came around and they were given some money because to take over their copper network. And there's some really interesting things happening back in the good old NBN days. They formed a health branch. And I remember meeting very early on with their then CEO, Shane Solomon. And then when Mary Foley took over, and now we've got Elizabeth Koff, it's not their core business where they came from. So they had to develop on the fly.
Build up a whole other capacity. I mean, it's a big deal.
And they did a great job. They got involved in hospitals. They got involved in cancer registries. They got involved in messaging services. They took over Medical Director, which was the largest general practice system. They amalgamated a lot of solutions. They're doing a lot of work in aged care. They're doing a lot of work in community services. So it is an exciting company. It was one thing that many of us were asking for from early days, to have a local digital health company, because a lot of our solutions were coming from overseas and being implemented here with varying levels of success. We had a couple of small IT companies doing things in healthcare. Telstra literally gave a lot of those small organizations exit strategies to enable them to keep their solutions going. Fred IT was a classic example of that. It's gone from strength to strength with the support of Telstra. It is a multi-billion-dollar company. We'll be watching and seeing what happened there. Elizabeth's doing a great job as the CEO. Consolidation and amalgamation, it is a business. It's no longer a public utility. It's now a business, and they need to understand that as well.
Yeah, and they've really gone all in on fire, haven't they? Especially with that smart brand that they launched this year too.
They really have. And again, realizing that it's a global trend and taking advantage of it. So they've done things like partnered with Canadian company Smile Digital Health to bring their Firebase platform. Again, a little bizarre that we Canadian Firebase platform developed on an Australian standard, but we won't go down that path. Their open data exchange using Fire standards. And they've been doing a lot of stuff, and they've been public about it, and they've been collaborative around it. So they've seen them working with various partners around the country to make things happening. So it's great to see the industry betting big on the future. The healthcare is 10% of our GDP and growing. We know there's an increasing demand for services. Even though we have classified as one of the best healthcare systems in the world, we know there's definitely room for improvement. And the idea of having a medical record system that can follow us around the country, wherever we are, whatever service we're receiving, no more faxes. We keep on hearing about the death of the faxes. And we've seen some companies like Consult Med pop up that are really driving that thing. I think we're at a bit of a turning point where all the things are starting to fall into place. The solutions are all sort of there. Organizations like Telstra Health and some of the other organizations are working to put them all together. Hopefully by the time you and I, touch wood, need healthcare services, it'll be a finely running machine.
I'm looking forward to that, George. Yeah, not that I want to need services at that extent, but the idea of having fax records around, I'm looking forward to that promise of interoperability being realised. And it's also awesome to see government working so closely with industry and really working together on this. It's really critical.
But I must admit, I still haven't thrown away my fax machine. It is sitting in the garage. I haven't used it. It's not plugged in.
Oh, my God, George.
It's still
I'm going to have to come and do an
just in
intervention.
case.
I'm going to have to do an intervention.
Just in case.
We need a clean out of your garage.
I'm a bit concerned because, back in the day, a lot of the fax machines use thermal paper. So I've got a thermal paper roll that's probably 25 years old in it. So I'm not quite sure it's going to work the way I think it works. But
I love it. All right, well, speaking of government, the Australian government unveiled their 10-year digital health blueprint, and it was backed by a huge $1.1 billion in funding earlier this year.
Yeah, look, the government has really stepped up to the plate, haven't they? I mean, we've seen some significant announcements by various departments around the use of digital tools within the government, and digital health is probably the standout. We were fortunate. We had Daniel McCabe, head of the Department of Health and Aged Care's Digital Solutions Group, on our show recently. And, he told us warts and all about what was happening and the challenges they faced and what they were doing. But they have a really strong forward-looking focus. And I highly recommend people who are interested in this space to listen to Daniel's podcast with us, but just keep abreast of what's happening. I think it's exciting times for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was we did a 2-parter because there was so much great content with Daniel. So yes, definitely go back and listen to that Pulse Potties if you missed it earlier in the year. Yeah, like you said, George, the government, they've just been really busy this year at all levels. And, you and I would remember a time where trying to get anybody in federal government or state talking about what we used to call e-health, it was just wow, someone showed up to the conference, it took so long. And now there's, of course, a plethora pillar of government strategies in digital health. We've got this like multi-layered approach. State and territories, they all have their versions of digital health strategies. And then, of course, we've got the Australian Digital Health Agency, and they have their own national strategy as well, which also has a huge focus on interoperability and health information exchange. And what I love to see in the maturation of these strategies as well is this real recognition that it's about giving access to data with, appropriate privacy and security protocols, of course, in place, but getting data into the hands of consumers and clinicians where it needs to be.
Absolutely. I mean, those of us who remember the original National eHealth Transition Authority, so the idea was this was just a short-term project. We'll implement this and move on quickly. And when was that? That would have been 2007 or 2008.
Yeah, mid-2000s.
It was actually preceding the change of government in 2007. So it was actually a Tony Abbott initiative in, I think it was 2005. So we've moved forward. The fact we've moved from a National eHealth Transition Authority to a digital health agency. We have, like you said, multiple strategies, all using the same North Star. So they're focused on the same delivery. And they've recognized that the value of data for both clinicians and more recently coming to the recognition that consumers as well is critical for us to have a world-class, efficient healthcare system. So we're headed in the right direction. Sometimes when you go to other parts of the world, they sort of look upon us as world leaders. I think sometimes here we sort of think, well, yeah, we probably should be leading a bit faster. But we're seeing layers and layers of digital health plans. We're seeing things coalescing. We're seeing, like you said, key people, first assistant secretaries turning up and getting engaged in detailed discussions, not just reading press release notes out to us. I think we've moved away from that lonely old days where every now and then something from digital health would come across our desks to literally a fire hose. And then again, I commend the great work that Kate's done over the years to make sure that stuff is captured in such a way that we can all understand it. Because I don't know about you, but I had a quick look at the new share by default legislation, and it's not the sort of thing I would sort of be reading before going to bed. There's a lot of detail there, but Kate's managed to make that usable by all of us.
I often go to Pulse+IT actually for referencing, like they've got over a decade worth of, if it happened in digital health in Australia, it's been captured in the Pulse+IT, archives. So it is a really good source. And government, they've just been busy this year with like lots of different areas for investment. My Medicare, there's modernising the My Health record, medication management, interoperability standards, which we've mentioned, of course, all that Spark stuff. And then, of course, funding for the Digital Health Agency itself has now been confirmed, which is great. I don't think they're now looking at just 12 months of funding and then we'll see what happens. I believe now they've got funding for a few years in a row, which is good.
It was, because again, having spent some time as a digital health advisor, or used to be a clinical reference lead in the old days with the Digital Health Agency in NEDA, the fact that all these projects had a 12-month lifespan that had to get physically renewed every June for the next financial year. So the fact they have sustained funding over a long period of time, so many more clinical people engaged in the organisation, so many more people involved in actually managing projects through various phases rather than sort of just short-term projects. I think it's been really exciting. Amanda Catamel's done a great job as the CEO in running the organisation, but there's a plethora of people at the agency who are doing some great work. And the fact that they actually have launched their own strategy with plans around it, I think that's really important. So it's no longer just a high-level strategy document, but there's an implementation plan associated with it with timelines. And we see when they do their reviews that let you know how they're going with timelines. Secure messaging has become a huge capability that they're taking into account. Provider Connect. We have lots of people delivering great healthcare in Australia, but sometimes finding out who they are can be a real minefield. So Provider Connect Australia enables us to do that. They're working with all the various software vendors, both allied health, residential aged care, general practice, to integrate them into My Health Record. My Health Record has changed dramatically over the last year from what it was, where the quote, the minister, the shoebox of PDFs to a integrated interactive system where we can use it to do many more things. And there's a roadmap ahead for it to become a vital tool for us to doing things going forward.
I mean, the health information exchange connected to that, we'll touch on My Health Record more in a second. But yeah, we had Peter O'Halloran talking on the pod. For people who haven't heard that episode, Peter O'Halloran's the Chief Digital Officer at the Digital Health Agency. And he came on the pod within days of their making the announcement. So if you want to catch up on what the health information exchange is up to, there's that episode that we did with him as well. It's going to be a huge game changer.
Absolutely. I mean, that interview with Peter was great. And again, a whole new level of transparency with the department around what they're working on, what's under the covers as they work forward, putting their hand out, sort of saying, well, collaboration. I mean, these are no longer just big projects organized by a third party and delivered anonymously. These are collaborative projects. And Peter is a great example of that transparency. I was at the MSIA meeting earlier this year. I was at the AITH meeting. I've been in a number of meetings. Peter's there. He talks the talk. He walks the walk. He's had experience. He's implemented an ACT-wide digital health system, which has been classified as one of the biggest success stories. So I think we're getting there. I mean, it's been a long journey. But yeah, people like Peter, people like Amanda, people like John Lambert up in Northern Territory, Richard here in New South Wales, are really taking the bull by its horns and pushing it forward. So it's really exciting times. And the HIE is going to be that game changer. You know, the fact that we'll have access to information across the whole spectrum of care. Because, you know, we don't always see the same GP. We don't even see the same specialist. We have multiple points of contact with our healthcare system, and having that integrated is critical for us to get that world-class system we want.
Yeah, and it's great to see the stakeholder engagement as well. And, you know, anyone working in government or who's dealt with government in all sorts of disciplines will tell you that their experience of stakeholder engagement is often feels like it's a tick the box exercise. And that is not what is happening here. Even Honor Magon and Robert Mann penned that article as well. Like, they were so excited about the health information exchange. They, you know, penned that article, and we covered that on a pod as well. Like, people feel very actively involved in this program of work and feel that their voice is not just being heard, but, you know, they're able to affect change as well.
And especially because it now provides a platform for innovation. So with a HIE, we'll be able to do a whole bunch of new things that we never thought possible because of that flexibility built into the systems. Robin and Honor were great when they looked at it from that perspective. I was particularly impressed with Honor McGunn, who really gave us some insights about her experience in the United States as well and how it relates. We've always sort of prided ourselves as being fast followers, but I think we're now at the opportunity where we'll be a world leader in this space. I think last year's MedInfo was probably a trigger for that. I think that it gave us an opportunity for people to realise now what's happening here, how excited people are. So I won't applaud the person who organised that, but it was you, Louise. And that was a really great event.
It was a great program, yeah.
And we had a lot of people. That weekend international policy session we had the day beforehand really gave us an opportunity to understand where we fit in the big picture of global digital health. We're doing well. We're doing a great job. Yes, we can do better.
Yeah. And the Digital Health Agency strategy really covers off a lot on that stuff as well. So it's not just about the things we've discussed, but, you know, expanding virtual care, uplifting the boring stuff, but super important, uplifting national and jurisdictional infrastructure so that we can actually accommodate AI and machine learning. That must be a real challenge for government, how you act on that so quickly. We're going to be covering all these in more, I think, on the pod in 25 and beyond, George. And now at the start of the year, when it comes to legislation around all of these things. So at the start of the year, there was a little bit of controversy, I believe, because the 7-day delay for uploading pathology reports to My Health Record, the government touted that's what they were going to do. Not everyone was happy with that idea, were they?
So it's interesting, you know, it did stir up things a lot, and it sort of did reflect the divide within our healthcare system. Clinicians are very risk averse. There's always that potential abuse of a system and someone getting told about their pathology report and having a rare cancer before the doctors had a chance to explain it to it. But the world has moved on. Consumers are much more informed nowadays. And let's be honest, you know, if you get a pathology report and there's a term you don't understand, Dr. Google is right there to give you some help around that. And we're now seeing some of these amazing new AI tools. So I think the colleges sort of, you know, was their initial knee-jerk reaction, well, this is our pathology report, you need to come through us to get it, to, okay, we'll share it with you, but you're going to have to wait a week to hear it. Some of the great discussions we had earlier in our podcast from consumer representatives, e-patient days and
Liz Salmi,
yeah, you know, they demonstrated that the healthcare consumer of the 2020s and above is very different to the healthcare consumer of the last century. They're informed, they're engaged, they take responsibility, and we need to work out how clinicians and consumers work better together. And I think the fact that we're working off the same data platform is a great start. There's still some cultural shifts needed, but engaged, informed consumer is probably the best advocate for their own health anywhere you'll find.
Oh, absolutely. And, Liz, when she was on the pod, she talked about the research they've done. So, yeah, I guess that it would be one thing to think, oh, well, not everyone's e-patient Dave or Liz Selmy. Not everyone is so actively engaged in their health. Although I haven't met many sick people that actually don't have questions and want to be actively involved. But, the research that Liz and her colleagues have done show that actually when you take a sample of the population and you do the research to see what happens when you get even the bad news results, stuff like cancer diagnoses that none of us want to ever hear. But even when it is bad news, people respond better to get that information up front. It's the delays and the confusion and misunderstanding, that withholding information is quite damaging in itself.
Exactly. The paradigm has changed totally. I remember years ago going to a shared decision-making forum around healthcare. And again, decisions around healthcare are no longer paternalistically decided by the brilliant doctor. They are discussions between the patient and the doctor and their team and the family. And I see more and more of this, especially now in aged care where we're having some significant challenges. Information is to be on hand. And some of the discussion we've had recently about the quality of that information. Again, we need to make sure we're using quality information. But what's the old saying? Sunlight is the world's best disinfectant. Transparency of information so that people can make better decisions together, I think is critical. And I think we'll see big changes. And I said, an informed, engaged consumer is the person who's going to take the greatest responsibility and seek the greatest quality of care.
Yeah, that's right. But of course, to have these things, it's not just the nice platitudes. You actually have to change legislation. So there was the 7-day delay thing. And then back in November, which was covered in Pulse as well, and Kate wrote about it in her year in review, the share by default legislation, which was introduced to Parliament in November. Hopefully that'll pass in the new year.
I was fortunate enough to be at the speech made by the Minister at the Victorian Healthcare Week where he announced the share by default legislation. And this is information about us. We have every right to have that access to that information. And we've seen all the struggles. We often get together in our discussions saying, I've asked my GP to share data. I've asked my pathology lab to share data, but they don't. Well, now it's going to become...
Yes, they will.
Legislated, you have to do it. You don't do it, you pay the cost. So I guess there will be a plethora of information, and sure, it may require some new skill sets to understand all that information. But at the end of the day, if you have that information and then you can go out, because we've seen not just AI tools, but second opinion tools, various ways of using that information to help enhance your decision-making process. And I think at the end of the day, healthcare is all around making informed decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And our final take on what's been happening in government in Australia, Peter O'Halloran and his friends and colleagues at the Digital Health Agency, they've ended 2024 with a bit of a Christmas present for us, haven't they, George?
They have. I did try to convince my family that that's my Christmas present to them as well, and so I don't have to buy them a present, but I didn't quite get away with that. But yeah, look, that was one of the revolutionary things that happened recently, is that the My Health app is a whole new game changer. People have access to information literally in their pockets at all time, and they can use it. And we've seen now all the things they want to add to it, like e-prescriptions and the ability to add your own information into it. So you're part of your own healthcare team. You're no longer just viewing what other people have said about you. You've got a role in adding your information that's relevant to you. I think all these things are going to be really, really critical. The richness of the record improves. That's going to require change the way both consumers and healthcare providers. I mean, the way I was trained in medicine 40 years ago has changed. The consumer has changed. The way we deliver services has changed. These tools are going to make us change the way we deliver care. And with the way we can assess that in real time now, the metrics will make us do things better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was very pleased to see that, yes, the My Health app, you can actually enter e-prescriptions now and enter in your own medicines, allergies, emergency contacts, organ donor status. I had a bit of a play with these features. Have you?
I've had a little bit of a play with them. Most of my playing for the last couple of months has been with my granddaughter. I've had some discussions with various people, and people are there. It's good when you see people and going, have you seen the latest version of My Health app? We didn't have those discussions 5 or 10 years ago.
No, that's right. So I was really excited. It's not just a line, guys. I was just like, oh, what a nice Christmas present. And, one of the things that I do, I'm on the board of Asthma Australia, and I've literally been in quite a few meetings in the last half of this year looking at the apps. The whole point is, what can Asthma Australia do to make sure that people have the right information and personalised information about them in their hands, in their pocket, their kids with asthma and everything. And so I was really pleased to be able to say to them, have a look at your My Health app. And of course, that app still needs, as Peter said, and the minister, no one's going to stand up and defend its current architecture, but, it is getting changed. But it's great. Instead of having to wait until it's a complete redo, we can actually get incremental benefits. So just being able to have all your allergies in one place, the medicines that you're on, that can be a real game changer for people.
For some people, it's a realization that information isn't easily available. They make the assumption that, they've told someone, so it's in a system, but now it's in your system. So you take responsibility for making sure that information is up to date and accurate. And we have seen solutions like this demonstrate inaccuracy. It's really easy to miss something during a history taking. And I don't know if I ever told you, so 30 so years ago, when my mother moved over to a new GP, my mother was, one of these traditional migrant women who came from overseas, very stuck in her ways. The doctor asked her, "Oh, do you smoke?" And my mother went, "Nah." And one of us jokingly said, "Oh, yeah, she's a 2-pack a day smoker, ha, ha, ha," thinking it's a joke. It was actually in her medical record for 3 years. And so finally, one day the GP said, "Mrs. Marcello, she really should cut down on your smoking." My mother looked at him and go, "What are you talking about? I haven't smoked a cigarette in my life." It's so easy for something to go mistakenly put into a record and become the truth. So the ability for us to look at those records and say, well, that's not quite right. So I blame one of my sisters for that. I think it was her sense of humor, not mine.
Yeah, well, see, and I wonder what would the AI scribe, if that was happening today, would the AI scribe flag that and say, this may not be correct. You should probably just check this out.
You probably should say, get the family out of there. They're more trouble than what they're worth.
Cool, yeah. All right, well, let's wind up these government-related stories in our year in review with a brief ad break, and then we'll come back with more news and analysis review of 2024. Welcome back, Pulse Potties. George, shall we talk about some of the biggest stuff-ups of 2024? You mentioned it in the intro, those public cybersecurity incidents that impacted healthcare. We did have more than one.
Yes. Cybersecurity has raised its ugly head again in healthcare. We've seen multiple reports over the year and over the past few years of major breaches, but the big one this year was the prescription exchange service provider Medisecure's data breach, which shared the details of almost 13 million Australians, and that was quite a significant issue.
Imagine working there and finding out, that's on your watch. Well, it's devastating because it was the biggest healthcare data breach in Australian history ever.
Yeah. And look, the naysayers have been sort of barking on about this, that, as we move to more digital tools, there's these risks associated. And, there were some shortcomings exposed in the review afterwards. But one of the challenges, of course, we faced was that Medisecure had other issues as well. So the fact that they'd lost a major government contract led to their collapse. So all of a sudden we had a organization with a breach and no one to call for accountability because the organization itself ceased to exist.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Australian Privacy Commissioner decided not to pursue a full investigation, which made sense because it's like the company's not around anymore.
That's right. I mean, you could literally beat a dead horse, but if the company was gone, there was no suggestion that it was,
Oh, yeah, it wasn't malicious. No.
And it, again, demonstrates the complexity of the systems we deal with because we don't have everyone sitting behind a single firewall. I have so many people keep on talking about firewalls, but pharmacies, general practitioners, supply chains are all standalone organizations with their own infrastructures and technologies, and making it all work seamlessly is hard enough. And then when you have someone come along looking for that little crack in the defense to take advantage of it, and we don't know whether it was foreign players, we don't know whether it was someone trying to get taken for advantage. Could have been a 15-year-old kid who had nothing else better to do on a Saturday afternoon. But we just don't know. We've seen the Australian government's had some very significant upgrades in its cybersecurity policy. We have an army general in charge of cybersecurity in Australia. We're taking it seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the things, probably not to labour the point with cybersecurity because, that was the biggest one. There were others, of course. But in 2025 and beyond, I think we still have a lot of work to do to educate people that cybersecurity is everyone's business, at all levels of the business, whether you're a clinician, a health information manager, executives, boards. It's not just for the IT guys.
I've been involved in technology now for decades. I literally, and I don't know whether I should be saying this in public, I failed a phishing test a couple of weeks ago. I got an email and I clicked. It looked so real and it made sense. And I clicked on it and then it came back, said, you failed the phishing test. Here are the next 45 minutes of education you need to do. So,
at least yours was a test. I felt for the real one. I've got up my systems for a day.
Mine fortunately was a test, but it was really embarrassing when your official title in an organization is Chief Technology Advisor and you get failed at a phishing test.
Well, thank you for sharing, George, and being vulnerable, because we actually I got a lot of personal feedback with that early episode this year where I shared my own mess up, and where people, I think, really appreciated it. These things are so sophisticated these days. I got one the other day and it was for motorcycle insurance. And it is about this time of year, my bike does need to get insured. And it was the company I used to insure with, but I've moved now. I'm no longer with that company. But the insurance, which I just think is a bit of a sexist move, instead of like Dear Louise or Dear Dr. Shaper, it was Dear Ryan. And so they addressed it to the man in the household, and it's my bike. He doesn't ride. Anyway, and that's how I knew. If it actually said, Dear Louise, time to update your insurance, to be honest, I would have I thought I changed from that insurer to it. Oh, maybe I forgot. Okay, click. But yeah, it was only because they got the name wrong that I didn't click on it. Otherwise,
They are getting much more sophisticated. The old stories of Nigerian princes have gone, and we have some very, very sophisticated schemes in place.
Yes, absolutely. Well, should we move to one of your favourite topics, George, innovation in aged care?
Yes, aged care. When I first started chairing the Aged Care Innovation Technology Council, was before the Royal Commission was called. And I thought, we'll chugging along. The Royal Commission, late 2019 through to 2021, really showed some of the challenges. And to the department's defense, they've gone to great lengths to try and answer some of those challenges. But those challenges are more than just technology challenges. There are huge issues in the delivery of care. The demographic shift we're seeing is playing a great role. We have seen some real changes in aged care. So we actually have a digital transformation unit within the Department of Health and Aged Care focusing on aged care, something we never would have thought about years ago. It's been a good year. We've had net positive effects, I would say. It's been a busy year, but then also recognizing that all these changes come with costs associated, not just the cost of acquiring technology, but getting workforce trained up to use the technology, utilizing the best advantage, working it within the current funding model. And we've seen some major reforms just in the last couple of weeks with the new Aged Care Act, which is changing the way it's happening. It's been a really busy time. I think aged care will be better for it, but there'll be a bit of a rocky road ahead for us as we go through that process.
Yeah, okay, it's going to be a challenge because, like you said, there's the standalone strategy, but even the Department of Health and Aged Care's blueprint, which we mentioned earlier in the show, they had, I think, 5 different programs in there. And one of the ones that stood out for me, just, wearing my occupational therapist trained brain, was they even include looking at assistive tech. So it's not just new tech, it's also, the traditional tech we've used as well. But a lot of changes for the sector. And then thanks to your professional networks, you told the story of how you met Faye Flavaris. And we were really grateful to have her on the pod as well. Having the head honcho for the digital transformation of aged care join us in the studio was great.
Yeah, I think that was a great interview. Hats off, because again, there was a whole new level of transparency. Faye has every 6 weeks has a public forum where she describes where her projects are up to, what's happening with them, calls people that come in support. Every fortnight, they have a digital transformation sector meeting where vendors, providers, consumers can all come in and have discussions. So that new level of transparency, I think, is amazing.
That's so impressive. How many people tend to go to those?
So the tech talks, so she has usually in excess of 400 people of those ones. And the digital transformation sector ones, which is a more closed group, you have to register for, you have to go through an induction process, often has over 100. So we have really detailed discussions. And the biggest challenge we face is that everyone is so keen to do things that people are falling over themselves to innovate. And the departments had to sort of put in some staged processes along the way. And it's been an exciting change compared to someone who's been involved in health from a government perspective for over 20 years to see this agile methodology being used and open discussions. And it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to see not just that level of transparency, but to know at the bigger level that it's not just one of those strategies that, sits on a cyber shelf gathering cyber dust, but it's actually funded, it's being actioned. And then this, like, no one said you have to report to the public that way, but the fact that Faye is doing that, it just creates a level of trust as well as people putting their hands up and wanting to help.
Yeah. The great thing about, of course, the new digital aged care data and digital strategy is that it actually came with an action plan. So it actually had dates set aside for some innovation, and also highlighted that, because there's some core stuff that needs to be done, data standards, infrastructure, interoperable clinical information systems. But it also started looking at virtual reality and AI and sort of innovative projects to see what they mean for aged care, because aged care has never been a bastion of innovation before. So now they've identified innovative technology projects, and let's try them and see what we can do with them.
No, that's awesome. And there was one story that Kate covered in the year in review. Can you tell us what AC/DC stands for, George? Aside from the awesome, Australian rock band, but I believe there's an aged care project with AC/DC in its name.
So it is interesting because, AC/DC, the older people in the crowd sort of start shaking their head up and down and doing their Angus impersonations and playing electric guitar. But it's the Aged Care Data Compare project, and it's a great project run between the University of Queensland and Professor Len Gray and his team there and the Digital Health CRC. And the idea is to look at what is the value of data that we capture in aged care. We capture a lot of data in aged care, but we often just capture it for compliances purposes. We capture it, we stick it in a database, and we never use it again. And the team at ACDC are sort of saying, well, how do we use that data in a dynamic way to improve the quality of care? And star ratings was part of that, but it's gone well beyond that. But they're looking at it, developing proactive models of care so that we can identify deterioration, to identify those people at highest risk, divert resources to them who need it most at the time they need it. So it's a really exciting project, their first report. And of course, it required that data to be in a standardized format. And FHIR came along at just the right time to enable that to happen. So we're seeing data standardization, utilization of data for quality improvement, real-time modeling of situations and responding to it. So it's a really exciting project, and it's not a highway to hell, as the ACDC would suggest.
I knew you would be able to come up with a song title reference. That's a good one, George. Well done. Okay, well, what about AI in aged care, George? What's happening there?
The definitions of AI keep on developing, and we've seen a lot of work this year around generative AI. But the core AI stuff, where it looks at data and looks for trends and picks up trends that people can't pick up purely because of the massive data available, has shown to be beneficial in aged care. So we've seen Telstra Health develop an electronic screening and a risk prediction tool for deterioration, which looks at the data captured from people in residential aged care and predicts those that are likely to have poorer outcomes or have a deterioration in the condition, or identify early on when they're having deterioration.
That's so impressive. And RMIT was involved in that, right?
Yes. So it's a local Australian project. And again, this is one of those great examples of having a company like Telstra Health in Australia who works with local industry, works with local providers, works with local academics to develop these solutions. We've been talking about this in acute care. We've seen ICU models, but in residential aged care, the changes are much more subtle. This is not someone who, spikes a fever of 42 or has a massive drop in their platelet count, which we capture in ICU because that's what we do. These are people who, slightly off their food they normally have 2 Weet-Bix for breakfast and now down to 1. Those sort of minor indicators that mean a lot more in that sort of population.
Wow. And what about, are there any other new or interesting sort of projects that stood out for you? Because I know Kate covered a few of them.
Listen, and Kate was at our ITAC conference this year where we had the ITAC Awards, and a number of organizations were sort of highlighted for what they were doing. But another one that comes to mind is the work being done by software provider AlayaCare. Now, AlayaCare is a Canadian company, but they've got a significant investment in Australia, well over 100 people working on their solution here in Australia. And they've even went there, they hired Annette Healy, who was the Chief Operating Officer of Baptist Care, as their CEO. So they've actually got people with local knowledge and skills deeply entrenched into their organization. And one of the biggest challenges we face in aged care is workforce. getting people signed up and staying within an organization is hard because it's hard work. It's not paid particularly well. It's stressful. It can be depressing and demoralizing at times watching people go through that end of life stage. So they developed an employee retention dashboard, which uses AI to identify when staff members are at the greatest risk of burnout or, at the stage where they're ready to hand in their resignation because it's all getting too much, and interact with them. Bring them on board to the discussion, maybe change the roles slightly, give them a chance to take some time off or do a slightly different role, but being able to intervene in a way that enables those people to stay within the workforce. Because once you've developed that skill set within aged care, bringing someone else new in has a significant ramp-up period. And most of these people love the job. I mean, they really want to deliver high-quality care. They really like to seeing those outcomes. But, when it's day after day and you see the grind and you see the challenges associated with it, if you can help the workforce. And we've seen that Institute of Healthcare Improvement's 3 criteria for quality healthcare has now also added happy workforce. And if the workforce is not well looked after, then they won't be able to deliver it the best as well.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, and it shows that AI, we talked a lot this year about AI use for clinical care and to improve care in some respects. But, this actually focusing on the operational side of healthcare, so needed. It would be interesting to see how they go.
Yeah, it really is important to have that ingrained throughout the whole system and improve the things that happen behind the scenes that make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, I believe, an AI robot that's multilingual or something. I know you love your science fiction, George. It sounds a bit science fiction-y. What's this robot about?
Abby was the star of this year's ITAC conference. She's a multicolored robot developed by a bunch of young, entrepreneurial, innovative Australian engineers. Grace Brown, the CEO of Andromeda, the company they made, said is in her mid-20s, recently graduated from university. This started off as a passion project during COVID when she was locked in her apartment. She's in Melbourne, so as you know, many of you in Melbourne were locked away in your apartments for so she started working on this concept of an AI-powered empathic robot, and she's come up with Abby, which is taken the aged care world by storm. We introduced her at the ITAC conference earlier this year. She's been at every other aged care conference I've been at this year. Organizations are signing up to using it. It basically is a communication tool between the aged care provider and the people at the residential aged care facility residents, and it speaks in 90 different languages. I mean, the fact that we look at our multicultural community, this solves a lot of those problems. It's fun. It's a real fun thing to play with. It engages people in to do exercises they would never do beforehand because the robot's doing it with them. But it's just so exciting to see these young 20-year-olds inventing solutions that help 80-year-olds live a better life. And the excitement you see from those people in developing these solutions. If you ever get a chance to meet Abby, I've got a photo with Abby and I carry it around proudly with me.
I love it. Maybe we could get Abby on the pod. But the other thing I was thinking, you said the CEO came up with this during COVID lockdowns while everyone else was like binge watching Netflix or cooking too much sourdough. Someone actually decided, hey, I'm going to build a robot that's going to transform aged care. That's impressive stuff.
I did have a chat to my children about that. Going, so what did you guys do during COVID? Your Fortnite scores had improved significantly, whereas this young lady had invented a robot which is solving a problem,
I love it. Very cool. Well, George, we've ended the year with a banger of an episode. We've been in the studio, I think, longer than we ever have before. I think maybe we should split this into 2 episodes. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we've spent a long time together just a couple of days before Christmas, and I'm sure there's Christmas shopping and tasks waiting for me to be done as soon as I walk out.
Oh, do you want me to keep you here? We can talk more digital health if you want to avoid jobs.
It's like everything in healthcare. You can't solve it. You can just postpone it.
Okay, well, but what have you got plans? Tell us, what are you doing over Christmas break? Are you hosting family at your place for Christmas Day?
So we are keeping it fairly low key this year because, like I said, my granddaughter hasn't had her first vaccinations yet. And being a big believer in the science of immunization and that we're making sure we don't expose her to anything yet. So we've all been whooping cough vaccinated and looked after. So we're having a fairly small one with the family. Not quite sure whether she needs a PlayStation 5 yet. She's probably going to get one anyway. So that and a stethoscope.
Oh, you can get her the digital stethoscopes now instead of the old-fashioned ones. Yeah.
We're looking forward to a break, and it's going to be a nice, relaxing time over the next week or two. What about you, Louise? What's your plans for Christmas?
Not setting an alarm and sleeping for a few days. Yeah, that's my glamorous life, George. As you know, I've been visiting my family a lot this year with Dad's health, and it'll be my first Christmas without the dog for a very long time. But yeah, we'll be FaceTiming the family and just enjoying a bit of downtime, really. And looking forward to, of course, joining you back in the Pulse Pod studio after we have a break for a couple of weeks. All right, well, have a lovely Christmas, Pulse Potties. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Stay safe over the holidays, be curious, stay informed. And in the meantime, George, for the final time in 2024, can you please read us out?
First of all, thank you, Louise. It's been a great year together. I've really enjoyed all 15 of our podcasts together, our interviews with people from around the world, the ability to share ideas virtually, and the fact that we can still see each other and laugh at what we're doing is great. I look forward to 2025 working with you guys, with Pulse+IT together. It should be a really exciting time. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all for listening to Pulse, brought to you by Pulse+IT News. Pulse is produced by Ivan Jurek of Octopod Productions. Big thanks to Kate McDonald and Emily Mara for contributing to today's episode. Subscribe, follow, and rate Pulse wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to Pulse+IT magazine at www.pulseit.news. Send your feedback and questions to pulsepod@pulseit.news. All the best for the new year, everyone.
Merry Christmas.